Greetings, good everything, Nubians, wherever you are in the world. How y'all doing, folk from YouTube? What's up? Y'all seeing this later, but we're live in Nubia. Good morning to you, sir. Hi.
Hey, good morning. Good everything, Professor Hunter. Yeah, I saw that I know you saw the report. You probably reported out on it. The for the first time this month or last month, I guess, streaming beat cable and broadcast both.
I didn't report on it. I've been kind of busy, and we're twins today, even though we didn't mean to.
You
Yeah.
sent me this. Get up and do global majority.
I didn't know you were gonna wear it. Like we don't plan these things, but that's nice.
We
So
got it there. We're in the middle of a push, aren't we?
yes, and let me spend just a second. First of all, thank everyone who signed a petition. I'm going to drop the link in the description of this video if you're watching it on YouTube. And I want to say a couple of things because we're going to talk today about strategy. You sent me this text, and I was like, I'm watching Peaky Blinders, and I'm like, they got a strategy to up in fascism, but it got thwarted from within. Somebody flapped their gums. Somebody close to the family. Somebody inside it was betrayed from inside. And I was thinking about Garvey and what he tried to do, and that the government was able to get prominent Black folk to testify against him.
Yeah.
And then, I started this petition, not because I started this petition, but because several iterations of this push to pardon Garvey hasn't happened yet. So I feel like, you got a constant drip. So, we can't stop. So I decided to do this thing on his birthday with his son, so this t-shirt, by the way, I went through several iterations. Dr. Garvey signed off on this particular design. And the goal is also to raise some money for his, because a large portion of the proceeds is going to that. So this ain't about a t-shirt because this drop is only going to last a week. After a week, you won't be able to get it anymore next Wednesday, which is the exact week of past his birthday. And so it's more like a collector's item to say I participated in something. But I reached out to everybody, Dr. Carr, everybody. When I say everybody, some of you saw Reverend Al Sharpton with the shirt, looking very svelte in it. Rex Chapman, who was getting his whole ass handed to him from Kentucky, wore the shirt and pushed the petition. I didn't even know Martina Navratilova. So Lenny Dykstra, like people were coming for him when he posted it. So
I lived in Philly a long time. Lenny Dykstra, the gambler. Lenny got yeah.
Yeah, he was mad. He was big mad.
Why is he mad?
I don't know. And that's what Rex was like, what? Why am I getting all of this smoke? And I was like,
come out of New York and go down to North Philly. Go on Broad Street right there by the Universal Negro Improvement Association, Liberty Hall, and go about a half block up from Broad Street, knock on that door, and bring that smoke to them. You might not make it out of North Philly since you're a Philly and everything. But anyway, I'm sorry. Bring all that smoke. In fact, let us know when you're coming. Maybe I'll meet you there.
And shout out to Yvette Nicole Brown, who, as an actor, she was the first person to, she said, I'm going to an event for Karen Bass. I'm going to wear it. And, I was like, thank you. But to me, it's stunning the people that I reached out to that didn't, people who, some of y'all think are down, and I'm not saying because they didn't do it, they weren't down, but no response. But you'll reach out to me if you want to promote something. You reach out to me if you want to come on the show. You reach out to me for things you want to get done. And this is not for me. This is to pardon Mark. So it's weird to me, Dr. Carr.
You can't do that for them. Unless they get a call back to play Marcus Garvey and maybe, I don't know, HBO or anyway.
It's Amazon Prime. Amazon Prime.
Sorry about that. That's right. Netflix and the American Negro don't realize though that Nollywood got Netflix on lock. I've seen about 10 more Nollywood projects on it, and all this in the original Yoruba. I'm like, look at these Negroes. Oh, the American Negro, y'all keep cutting yourself off from the world. Find out what's gonna happen to you. Y'all already in the trash can country. You about to be in the trash can. But we'll say less. The Negro. So I mean, what is this? Over this week since it launched, what are your thoughts?
I'm confused and not confused because it's 128 consecutive Saturdays with you. I realize that our freedom will always be fought by a very small handful, and then when we get close, the bandwagon will get heavy. And it looks like victory. Everybody will jump on, and that's great. but the work is hard. And to get people to do something that costs them nothing but a few seconds, it's baffling to me. The petition had over 200,000 views and less than 5,000 signatures. That means 200,000 people clicked on it and didn't take the 1 minute to just click, and then hit send. Right?
That's good to know. I mean, it's good to know that many people viewed it, because if you can see that means the people at change.org can see it too.
Yeah.
And
so trying to reconcile, what does that mean? Like, oh, this is not a worthy cause. Oh, this cause doesn't, it's not going to do anything. All right, yeah, symbolic. I don't understand. And then, but again, Garvey was taken out primarily by people who look like him. I think, of course, the government has to plan. J. Edgar Hoover, and we'll talk about that more a little bit today, even though I've been talking about it. Thank you for coming on my radio show on Marcus Garvey Day.
That is, like you said, the global majority. That was an honor. Always an honor to join you in that space. Ever since Ajwa brought me up there that first time, that is, you walk in that space. I know it's different now because of COVID, but we will never displace the radio and talk radio. We're not in the golden age anymore. Anybody with a uplink, and anyway, yeah. But with you, that that reminds me of the throwback days. You know what I'm saying? You're a throwback. So to be anywhere where you're convening on the radio, that is not anything I take for granted. Thank you for the invitation. And though you all know what I'm talking about. Some of y'all old enough to remember the greats of talk radio, and you are not only in that tradition, you represent them. So I'm grateful.
All right. Well, I thank you. But I look at myself more as a conduit.
Of course.
Even with this, it's like, let's just put the pieces in place. Because I feel like, and this is what I also came to the conclusion, if a person's not doing it themselves, so like when you think about Du Bois and A. Philip Randolph, Garvey was a threat because he was dealing with people that they wanted to, so it's like there's only room for one of us, so there's only room for two of us. Oh, here you come. You're taking away some of our market share. What are you dipping into our ability to, it's like I'm confused, but it feels like a threat, right? And I look at that like that's weird to me, because if the mission is freedom, who cares how we get there? I don't care how we get there, to be honest with you, which is why I reached out to everybody, like even people I don't F with. I'm like, can you? And some people that I don't F with wore the shirt and to put the link out, and I don't F with them.
I mean, in the late 60s, early 70s, and we're in the year 1972 of the Gary Convention, which was the spring of 1972. I was talking about that I have a student in my class over at the law school who is from Gary, and we were talking about Richard Hatcher, who along with Carl Stokes, the first two Black mayors of large cities in this country, and it was Hatcher who hosted, and the Gary government, the 1972 political convention. In fact, I think I was just rereading this book here, The Defeat of Black Power, about this very point. In fact, the Gary Convention is Leonard Moore's book, The Defeat of Black Power, Civil Rights in the National Black Political Convention, 1972. And of course, there's Amiri Baraka, who ended up being the chair of the convention, which was set up at first glance recognizably to like a Democratic, or at this point, white nationalist party convention by state delegations. And the key to that convention, which almost came apart on several occasions. The great Cream Wonder Moore was there talking about reparations. The opening ceremony, of course, was attended by an honored guest on the rostrum, Coretta Scott King and Betty Shabazz. Jesse Jackson, of course, opened up with This Nation Time. In fact, there's a lot of footage from the convention, particularly the mass meetings after they broke off into state delegations and caucuses. There's a film that has been released fairly recently called Nation Time, or is it Gary 1972? But anyway, Ron Walters. I mean, think about a lot of people who are still around. Ron Daniels, of course, James Turner, who just made transition. We talked about James Turner, but I mean, just every walk of life. Elected officials. Coleman Young at that time was a state senator from Michigan, would eventually be the mayor of Detroit. And I just mentioned all that to say that at the center of that convention, where they talked about what should be the Black political agenda, there were two things. Number one that emerged out of that was a set of principles and a set of objectives that were agreed upon. And after 1972 is when you see the explosion, for example, in Black elected officials, even as the state is moving against all of these folks, because COINTELPRO is running hot by then. Okay. But that's the first thing. But the second thing to what you're raising, Prof, is that the reason that convention was able to not only coalesce and come together, but remain together and get to the end, because there were moments when, like, the Michigan delegation was walking out. There's a famous moment captured on film when Coleman Young and them, some of them are elected officials. Many of them are in organized labor, as Coleman Young was, and they simply can't get down with some of the more, what they would consider radical dimensions. The Black nationalists are there. I mean, everybody is there. Everybody, to the point you're raising. And as the Michigan delegation is walking out of the hall, all the state delegation, and people are like, no, no, no. Baraka comes to the microphone. He's looking over, and in his brilliant way, Baraka could be fiery, Baraka could be, but he was an artist. He's a poet.
Mm-hmm.
He said, he leans into the microphone. He's looking. He says, Michigan, 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 Michigan. And people start taking up they turn around and come back in. No, Michigan, Michigan, to the point you're raising. We don't agree on everything. When we say Black, as we've talked about many times, whether Walter Rodney, who we just finished up the groundings with my brothers, talks about it as a political formation, everything that isn't white, because whiteness created Blackness, whether we think about it in cultural variations, Black ultimately works politically when there is a principle family of operational unity. In other words, I don't agree with you on this, you don't agree with me on that, but on this, we must come together. So when you say the destination, the goal is there, I'm not sure at all that goal is shared. And operational unity should have had us all overflowing the boundaries of something that's something that Dr. Julius Garvey wanted. And it's also something that's right. But I mean, this is a simple thing. But Barack Obama didn't sign it when he was called upon to do so, and he was the one. And forget the hundreds and millions of signatures. There was one signature could have done it, and they've petitioned every president since Jimmy Carter. In fact, the first person to put the petition for executive clemency for a pardon was Marcus Garvey himself, from the Atlanta Federal Penitentiary to Calvin Coolidge. So I mean, yeah. And as far as I'm concerned, Barack Obama, I hope he lives another 100 years, and every second of every hour of every day of his life, he will never be able to explain why he didn't do that. Actually, he would be able to explain it, but I doubt he would, because that would be too embarrassing. Because after all, he Black as hell when he wants you to vote for him. But anyway, come on back.
Can you hold up that book again, please?
Oh yeah. The Defeat of Black Power. Yeah.
All right, hold on. Let me give a solo view. Okay. Civil Rights in the National Black Political Convention of 1972. So that was a specific thing. But the Defeat of Black Power. And
I mean, that's marketing. Because we're here. Black Power wasn't defeated. But what is this? Louisiana State University Press got to make a little bit of their money back. University presses usually operate on a loss margin. So, you got to have something sexy so the white folks will buy it. Because apparently our market isn't enough until we decide it is. But anyway, that's
so I mentioned what I mentioned, not out of, anything other than facts, right? So I just wanted to put the facts out there, and also to say that, I'm so grateful to the people that did, pick up their, some folk, and we got it. I was like, yes, Nubians, yes, absolutely did what needed to be done, and it's not over, right? I'm going to keep going. You're going to keep going. We're going to keep going. But we were watching a documentary together, Inside Nubia. Thank you, Roy T. Anderson, his documentary, which you are featured prominently in. Every time you come on the screen, it just lights up. And I was like, come on through, Doc.
Nah, my man. I love Roy Anderson. Roy and his wife, the whole team. Roy, who's you interviewed Roy. You talked to Roy.
Yeah, he was
on. Roy was a stunt man. I mean, Roy kills me, but I love Roy tell them Hollywood stories, because you don't think about the people who are running around getting blown up, getting hit by. You think, oh, that's Denzel. No, that's not Denzel. That's Roy Anderson.
Yes.
Anyway, but he took they took their own money to make them.
Yeah, I mean, you think about his first documentary was about the Maroons of Jamaica, which, you know, we're going to have an original Maroon in later on. Dr. Sunyatta will be joining us. You know, we're all Maroons in our minds. And that when Dr. Garvey reached out to do this documentary, he was actually working on a documentary for Nanny about Queen Nanny, and he didn't have the time, but it came back around. So we were talking about that on the show last week. You know, but I think about him in Marcus Garvey Park screening his film on Wednesday, and at the exact same time in Nubia, more than 577 people are watching that same film and being able to comment and talk with one another about different things. And as we were watching it, you know, and some people, you know, will label Marcus Garvey as a grifter because he took this money from people. But I was like, didn't he buy those ships though? And didn't he have all over the world, you know, Negro improvement spaces where people are inspired to do for self? And I'm like, don't some of y'all buy a prayer cloth from pastors and tithe the churches that give you nothing, but they're not grifters? But he was a grifter and he had whole ass ships that actually sailed. Yeah, it wasn't perfect, but perfection is a process. And the money that he was getting was from people who were domestic workers and sharecroppers, people that didn't have a whole lot of money, just giving $5. And that was a whole lot back then to do something for self. And he uplifted a whole generation of people that did give rise to Bob Marley and Malcolm X and a whole host of African leaders. That's worth it, I think. Grifter? Okay. Interesting.
People say a lot of things. As my friend John Bracey at University of Massachusetts has said, you know, people tend to spin theories on very small margins of knowledge. I mean, we all do it. You know, we all do it. And so when you think about the counter program to Garvey, when Garvey makes transition in 1940 in London, you know, the organization continues. Thomas Harvey takes over at some point. They pay for Garvey's body to be funeralized in England. And Amy Jakes Garvey, you know, Julius and Marcus Garvey's mother, really is the one who keeps it going. But there's a concerted effort to destroy Garvey by erasure. I mean, this is the paperback edition of a book that she paid for publication herself called Garvey and Garveyism. And for those of you who, if you go to narrative, you'll see we did extensive conversation about Marcus Garvey. You know, this is our 3rd August. So we've done hours on Garvey, and you should go and look at that. But I do want to mention the fact that she paid for this. Now, this isn't, I mean, I have the other one, but this is not the original edition. This is the Collier Books edition from 1970, because, you know, for decades, there was an attempt to erase Marcus Garvey's name. But once the Black Power movement busts up and they realize they can't erase his name, well, then these companies start coming in out of the social structure and figuring they can profit. And if you see, let me see here. This, for example, is one of the many editions. This is the Athenaeum edition of Philosophy and Opinions of Marcus Garvey, which came out in 1923 and 1925. Amy Jakes Garvey edits that, actually 25 and 27, I think. Hollis Lynch at Columbia University wrote the edition that wrote the forward to this edition. But there's Dr. Garvey's mother. There's Julius Garvey's mother, Amy Jakes Garvey. And you see it is dedicated to the true and loyal members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association in the cause of African redemption. Well, there's no money in African redemption. Now, in 2022, there's a lot of money in making movies about African redemption. It typically, historically, you know, I mean, I want to see the woman king too. Of course, the branding leads you to believe that woman and king you have to use that adjective, woman king. But if you go back to classical Africa, Peroi or Pharaoh, which doesn't translate to king at all, but great house, there were women who occupied the Peroi, the most famous of which would be Hatshepsut. So you don't have to say female pharaoh. I mean, it's absurd. But, you know, when you were following behind your master, it's easy to distort your view of yourself because you're looking through somebody else's eyeballs. But to my point, historically, now you can talk about triumph, the scorpion king, the woman king. You know, but in terms of contemporary movements, African redemption is anti-world system. in terms of this world system where we've been exploited. And Garveyism is a real threat to the world system as it emerged in the teens and 20s, because two things are happening. One, you're between European international conflicts over the next phase of the European world system. That we kind of, that's too long, so we kind of use a phrase that Europe used to kind of make itself, because it sits at the center of the world in its imagination, make it think, make us think that we're all in it. So by inter conflict period, the 1920s and 30s, teens, 20s, and 30s, they would call it the interwar period between World War I and World War II, as if the whole world was at war, instead of Europeans fighting each other and pulling some of the rest of us in. But that's the first thing. There was a crack. There's a transition taking place. By the end of so-called World War II, the United States emerges ascendant and nears and it ultimately secures the center of this new world system. But they weren't at the center of the new world system in 1913, 14, and 15. And so that's the first thing. Garveyism emerges when there's a crack. And guess what? The overwhelming majority of people in the world are not white, are not European, are not the children of the Europeans in terms of the modern state system, particularly the Western Hemisphere. And so they are chafing under this assault. Europe has not yet secured, and arguably never secures, Africa completely. But they're still engaged in the war phase, the battle phase. The Western Hemisphere still chafing under European oppression, trying to fight their way out. And so Garveyism appears at a moment when the Europeans are fighting each other, and they pull their cousins, the Americans, in. They fighting each other. And guess what? While they're fighting, the vast majority of the world is like, they shooting. I made you look. In other words, now we're gonna fight to get out. So Garveyism is a real threat, which is why these European countries, many of whom were in conflict, and the United States, who is their emerging large rival, cooperate on the idea of suppressing Garveyism. The second thing is Garveyism really does operate around the concept of operational unity. We all don't have to agree. So you got Garveyites. In fact, I'm going to show you a book and then we'll keep going. This is I'm going to talk about this a little bit more later. This is my friend James G. Spady, who is now an ancestor, and that's a story for another day. Some of you all know Spady from Philly, lived in Philly many years anyway. This is Spady's book, Marcus Garvey, Jazz, Reggae, and Hip Hop, and the African Diaspora, James G. Spady. Now, I talked about Spady a lot with my Freedom School students a couple of summers ago when he made transition. We talked about him a lot because, they're his grandchildren in many ways. They from Philly. He lived in Philly a long time. But when I tell you operational unity, let me just quote you something right quick, Professor Hunter. This is from 1922, from an article by John Fitzgerald and Odie Scruggs, A Note on Marcus Garvey at Harvard, 1922. We talk about operational unity, right? Now, by the way, this book published by the Marcus Garvey Foundation Publishers, Philadelphia. There are interviews in here that you won't find anywhere else because Spady talked to Thomas Harvey. Spady interviewed, and that's a story for another day. I'm going to go down and start talking about James Spady. If you know James Spady, you know what I'm talking about. This isn't secondhand information in this book. Any of the people who are in it. Let me read this. He says, the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey was introduced to an enthusiastic audience at Harvard by, wait for it, Charles Hamilton Houston. Operational unity. And y'all know Charles Hamilton Houston, who is called the man who killed Jim Crow, Vice Dean, Howard University Law School, trained, among others, Spotswood Robinson, Oliver Hill, Thurgood Marshall, and then made transition in 1950 just at the lip of these breakthrough cases, which, of course, include Brown versus Board of Education, Pauli Murray. Howard, let's go. What does he say? He was a student at Harvard Law School. Came out of Dunbar High School in D.C., where he was born and raised. Went to Amherst College. In fact, I have a student in my class now at the law school at Howard who went to Amherst. It's very interesting to see this. Shout out to my brilliant young students. I had them Wednesday night. Otherwise, I'd have been, with everybody watching Roy's documentary. But Charlie Houston, of course, famous. Now, let's tie him to the junior senator from Illinois who became president of the United States for 2 terms. When people said, he's Barack Obama's the first editor of the Harvard Law Review. Yeah, Charlie Houston was an editor, not the editor in chief, but an editor of the Harvard Law Review. Let's continue. He says, This is what Houston said. Houston announced, and this is Spady. Spady's research is nobody better. But see, Spady published primarily Black institutions, Black living institutions like the UNIA. And then what people do, and I'm talking to you 5 or 6 scholars who perhaps like people who watch the petition and didn't sign, who come in on watch us on YouTube or maybe even subscribe to Narrative. Good to see y'all. Operational Unity, got no problem with you. And I know some of you Negroes is the ones who quote James Spady, but not for attribution, because you think nobody will ever find it. And so yeah, I know why we don't always talk, because when I show up, when people like me show up, that's when you know, and we all know, we know what it is. Governance conversation. This is what Houston announced. This Charlie Houston, as a law student at Harvard in 1922, introduces Marcus Garvey, who was on the campus of Harvard. This is what Charles Houston has to say. He says, honored guests and fellow members of the Nile Club. The Nile Club. Yeah, N-I-L-E. Story for another day. I'd have to say, this is what Houston says, I'd have to say that this is the most exciting moment of my entire educational experience. Dunbar High School, Amherst College, Harvard University. The most exciting moment of my entire educational experience, both as a student and teacher here at Harvard and elsewhere. He says, in my capacity as presiding officer of this club, an organization that was conceived for just such purposes as tonight's, I am pleased and privileged to present to you a man whom I personally regard as being not only the greatest leader of men since Moses. It's Charles Hampton Houston, Brown versus Board of Education. Social structure. You don't know nothing about Charles Hampton Houston. He says the greatest leader since Moses. He says, but a bearer of goodwill to all persons of African descent everywhere. Gentlemen, the Honorable Marcus Garvey, provisional president of all Africa. Now, when's the last time anybody heard Charles Hampton Houston? First of all, heard his name. If you heard his name, I know you didn't hear that. Barack Hussein. Last time that came, since you love talking about how you standing on shoulders, guess what? The shoulders of the man that killed Jim Crow, you know who he's standing on? You heard what he said at his own mouth, but you got to go James Spady for that. And governance, you're not going to find, and if you find that in a book on Garvey somewhere, they're going to figure out a way to nuance it. Well, he was under pressure. Well, everybody calm down. You got to be scared of your master. Oh, because you shouldn't have a master. And that's the other part of Garveyism. He overflowed national boundaries. He spoke to something deep in our soul, and he had no regard for oppressors. That's why he had to be stopped. And he couldn't stop him, because look at us.
Yes. So you also talked about Hubert Henry Harrison.
Yes.
And there's you should know, those of you in Narrative, go to that amazing conversation, because that's the first time I ever heard that name and that relationship to Garvey, and how maybe, because nothing starts from the beginning. There's always a begatting, right? There's always something before, and then things evolve, which is why no one person should be able to take credit for anything, because everything comes from something.
Everything.
Which is why the ego, man, is a crazy thing that people need to have. Plant flags and have discovery and say they're the first to do something, and even if you're the first to do something, somebody broke down some barriers to make that even possible. None of us operate on our own steam, period. That said, I have a question for you, strategy, because we're talking strategy. Mm-hmm. And Garvey's strategy was for the whole diaspora, anywhere Black people are, for them to know that they could be self-sufficient. So that meant that they could, farm their own food, get their own, build their own community, hold their heads up high, knowing from whence they come. And the shipping idea was to be able to travel throughout the diaspora and trade goods and services, because guess where most of the food is grown? In warm climates. So it was freaking brilliant. Strategy, erasure versus killing. So we know Fred Hampton, Malcolm, Martin, Medgar, got to get rid of these people. They're dangerous. I think it's more potent to misinform, disinform, and try to erase. I just wanted to know your thoughts on strategy, and then how do we combat the strategy? Because discrediting somebody, trying to undermine somebody, they tried it with King, oh, he's cheating, and oh, he might be this and that, they sent the letter to Coretta, and tried to find that didn't work. All right, we got to kill him. What are your thoughts on that? And moving forward in terms of how we, as you mentioned, come together collectively to thwart that.
Well, I think, as we've talked about many times and will continue to discuss, which is the beauty of us coming together. Ideas. This is, again, I mean, the time we spent with Walter Rodney's The Grounding with My Brothers last Monday, the Monday before that, and then this coming up Monday, we'll continue to have conversations as we think about what we want to do next, collectively studying in office hours and have conversations. That time is invaluable because when you put ideas into the conversation through the process of study, contemplation, those ideas then rub up against each other. And in that context, they then spark action. So, of course, the challenge of organization is to wed that study and action to a common objective and common sets of objectives. And we know that works. I would say that ideas are the fuel that lead to the unintended consequences for any formation that would try to oppress people. Let me make that very concrete. I struggled through, because we are of African descent. I know that some of my students or people I will encounter from moment to moment have been pulled into this formation because of the perpetual blitz of social structure mass media, white-facing media. This new show that our brother Leonard has, who is called Charlemagne the God, I think. Have you seen any of that, Professor Hunter?
No.
Okay, I hadn't either, but I forced myself for about 30 minutes to go through some of the clips. Again, streaming eclipsed broadcast and cable for the first time, both of them last month. And we know that, we're not ahead of the game. Obviously, COVID put a lot of people in this space, and now we continue in this space, and it gave us a crack to build some institutional space where we can do this real core work. And of course, we still have this space to bring people in. So I went on to YouTube just to see, and I said, and I watched the clips. I watched a little bit of interview with Issa Rae, and I saw Flame, and what's the white dude married to the black woman, the comedian who's always cast as the
Bill Burr? No, Gary.
Yeah, Gary Owen. That's him. Yeah.
Seems like a lot of white comedians married to black women. Okay, good.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean, yeah. And so I guess there's a regular panel. I won't get too deep into this because, again, I know what it is. But the point is that, to something you raised a second ago, when you say, we know the counterintelligence program, we know, of course, John Edgar Hoover, coming out of George Washington Law School, who creates basically the FBI, and who cuts his eye teeth on Marcus Garvey. If you look at Robert Hill, who edited the Marcus Garvey papers, who was continuing to edit those papers, he did another volume called Raycon, which is the racial conditions program, where they had everybody under surveillance. A. Philip Randolph, Chandler Owen, considered the radicals, Marcus Garvey, Du Bois. I mean, you see the documents. Hill puts them together in a nice little volume. And many of those people, particularly Randolph, Du Bois, them are involved in the Garvey Must Go campaign. And that is in part because they feel like Garvey and Garveyism is an action or behavior as a movement that could harm black people in the United States. Well, it's not just ideology. It's them thinking strategically what will draw more attention to us and cause problems in some ways. And so, Du Bois, who has his own internal struggle, I would say that honesty is not something that you can accuse him of not embracing. But he's honestly stumbling around. Remember, as the war is starting, he's got this closed ranks idea because he wants to be involved, and he thinks black people, if we sacrifice and do this, perhaps it'll advance the cause. And then coming back from World War I, he puts in the same Crisis magazine he edits his famous "We Return Fighting" essay. So it's editorial. So he's back and forth. A. Philip Randolph and him, he's like, Yeah, the Germans, I don't know that we should not sit this out. Maybe Negroes should sit this out because you the one lynching us, not the Germans. And him and Chandler Owen, them guys, it's like, man, these guys got a problem. Then you got this African Blood Brotherhood, Cyril Briggs, and them. There's a lot of formations going on in the 1920s, teens and 20s. And some of them are recruited into this Garvey Must Go campaign because Garvey is the Garveyites, the members of the Universal Negro Improvement Association and African Communities League of the World. When they show up, these are the Negroes that nobody invited. You know, I mean, so you got your best dress and tuxedo on. You're sitting here trying to make sure that you speak the King's English, and then and then here come the cats who wait tables, the cab drivers, the people without no job, and they come in. Ethiopia, the land of our father. Hey man, they gonna run us all out of here, bro. And come on, man, Africa for the Africa. Shit. Now, if you don't think that that's not the reaction in terms of class to many of the Garvey folk, fast forward to today, you know your cousins and them that show up. Now, you know them Negroes, but you know them from the corner. You know them from the block. You know them from the porch. You don't want to see them at the job. These Negroes is causing problems. Well, guess what? Those are our people. And you really do love them when you get in trouble because, you know, them Negroes ain't scared of police. Or if they are scared, they swallow their fear for you. And they fight for you. But at any rate, let me get to the point when you raised the question on strategy and what we do going forward. Well, it is the ideas that are being promoted through the UNIA that are animating people. And here we want to take Marcus Garvey for a moment, not out of the equation, but move him so you can see all the people that are surrounding him, the millions that are surrounding him. As he said when he's leaving the federal penitentiary, I had the millions who surround me. Now, as Tony Martin would write, and we talked about this Monday on your show, Marcus Garvey Hero, which is a beautiful little book for like high school students, maybe undergraduates these days, the first biography, Tony Martin, my man, Tony Martin, who had something called the New Marcus Garvey Library. I don't have a picture of him there, but you can see some of the other books that he published in the New Marcus Garvey Library. I keep a lot of them back here because I knew Tony well. That was my man. At any rate, what Tony Martin writes about in here at the end of Marcus Garvey Hero is that one of the most effective things about Garveyism was Garvey himself, because he was an electric speaker, a compelling speaker, and an electric and compelling writer. So many millions more than heard him, read him. And Martin says you cannot overlook the power of the written word when it comes to Garvey. When you read the Negro World, which, by the way, in fact, African Fundamentalism and Literary Garveyism, two of the books in the New Marcus Garvey Library, talk about Amy Jakes Garvey, Amy Ashwood Garvey, his first wife, and there's a huge story there. Hubert Harrison's part of this story. But anyway, y'all can go to narrative and look at when we go through all this. The point is that these publications were pushing ideas. We're pushing accomplishments of the organization. Garvey is crystallizing ideas. And as he is doing that, those ideas overflow the boundaries of a social structure's ability to regulate Black people. Now, what does that mean as a matter of strategy? Well, we have ideas. We have influence that comes from people listening and thinking through those ideas. The borders that hold up the modern world system also are interlinked. But for those of us who find ourselves within these countries, in this modern world system, if you are oppressed, the key to that system remaining over all of these folk is that while they are looking at people beyond national boundaries and talking about how we can keep everybody in line, they want you to stick up under that flag, that specific flag of the people who got you oppressed in this system. So they don't want the United States people to talk to the Jamaicans. They don't want the Jamaicans to talk to the people in Cameroon. They don't want those people to talk to people in England, even though those people have much more in common than they do difference, whether it be class, whether it be race, particularly those two things. Now, when you think about that in the context of the UNIA, it becomes very apparent what we must do and continue to do going forward. Right now, in our conversation, many of the people in this conversation now, they're coming from all over the United States. I'm sorry, I don't mean start there. They come from all over the world, including Europe, Africa, the Caribbean, Latin America, the US. I'm talking about in this conversation right now. In its iteration in Nubia, as we're in real time interacting with each other, the chat is filling up, people are talking, having conversation. And later on, as it opens up and other people come in, people are sitting there, you know, their rhythms by this, you know. Bishop Kamathi down at Shrine of Black Madonna presiding bishop. The bishops watched that. I was corresponding with Jeremiah Wright day before yesterday. Bob Jeremiah is in here. Of course, we talk about Freddie Haynes, so many others. There are people all over the world. Baba Osnam in the UK, out of Soje and them, all people in the continent of Africa, the Caribbean. So that is a problem for a system that relies on us sticking up under whatever flag we see ourselves. But see, Garvey, the UNIA, creates a flag that destroys the national boundaries: red, black, and green. And as Roy Ayers say in his song, red, black, and green, if you think about it, you know what I mean. That's the hook in that song. Red is for the cup. And, he starts talking about the red, but at the end, the hook is red, black, and green. If you think about it, you know what I mean. That's a problem. That's not red, white, and blue with stars and stripes. That's not any of the flags of Africa or the Caribbean, which take their colors in many ways from Garvey. And in the case of Kwame Nkrumah, who came in contact with Garveyism as a young man, the Black Star in the Ghanaian flag is taken directly from Garvey, as is the Black Star Line, the name of the shipping companies in Ghana, government shipping companies. Those tie together. And so that's a real threat. That is a real threat. Why? Because that idea will then spark the possibility of cooperation. That's why on this bird app, as the kids call it, Twitter, I'm looking at stuff trending on the day that you launched the petition, and then subsequently we see Pardon Garvey and Marcus Garvey trending. Why? The algorithm can't suppress it. But then every day for the last few weeks, I'm seeing some form of op type weaponized ignorance coming up. Akata, ADOS, Tariq Nasheed. I'm naming these people. Why? Because these are open enemies of the idea of operational unity. And I know that it ain't all coming from any of those people. This is weaponized ignorance that understands the key to keeping people oppressed is keeping them apart. You've got to keep them apart. You know what I'm saying? So I'm seeing this stuff trending, and I know, unlike that Garvey and Pardon Garvey hashtag, this is trending because somebody who has an interest in keeping us apart is dropping this. You know what I'm saying? So anyway, go ahead. You
I was going to say the ignorance part. Talking with Roy, who is Jamaican, Roy Anderson, who did the documentary that you were featured in, that we screened in Nubia, and we're going to be screening more films together. And I'm loving that. We discovered something in doing it. But actually, Urias, when he dropped that silent film when you were on the road,
Oscar Michaud,
we all got to watch Oscar Michaud together. That really cracked open the possibilities of what we could do together. But Roy said he didn't learn about Marcus Garvey, and he's Jamaican. And I asked you, when did you run into him? You were like, not in school. I didn't learn about him in school. My father had a little black pamphlet, as I was telling you on Wednesday. It was in my house, so I knew who Garvey was, but I didn't learn about it in school. And so talking to Dr. Garvey, Julius Garvey, who was in Jamaica on Marcus Garvey Day, celebrating his father's birthday, but his push in his organization that you can all reach at themarcusgarvey.org, which is where the proceeds from this shirt is going.
Yes.
Is to educate people about his dad. Like, he wants Garveyism and Garvey's mission and Marcus Garvey to be taught in schools in Jamaica, which is it's not national. So I wanted to bring someone in who was raised up in the tradition of Garvey.
Yes.
One of our sisters who makes the best tea. Before we get into this, let me bring in Dr. Sunyatta Amen. Hey, unmute yourself.
Let's do it.
And let me tell you, I was walking because I've been getting my 10,000 steps in every day, and I'm walking in the park, and I'm smelling something that smells like what you put in Octavia Butler. It's like elderberry or something. And I was like, I got a whiff, and I was like, I think that's in Sunyatta's tea, because the tea is so aromatic. It is so amazingly delicious. And that when I was walking in the woods, I was like, she done went out in the woods and picked some stuff that smell good and put this in this tea. So thank you for that.
Yes.
It is my absolute pleasure. Hello, beautiful people. I'm so glad to be here with you. Dr. Carr, you're on fire.
No, we were just preparing the ground. We waiting for you to come. We need you to talk about the homie, the big homie. Marcus Garvey. How are you, Dr. Amen?
Feeling good, feeling good. You know,
Happy birthday. I know this is Jamaican Independence or Emancipation Month and
yes.
Black August. So
It's always exciting. And Jamaicans, true to form, have no behavior whatsoever. So we just celebrate the whole month. We'll celebrate Jamaica the whole year. You give us an opportunity to talk about Jamaica, it's going to enter the conversation. And Jamaicans have an expression, walk with your flag, meaning everywhere you go in your pocket is a little Jamaican flag, some kind of symbol. So wherever you go, if there's something great happening or you did something, you're pulling out your flag. Advertising
yes.
always for Jamaica. You'll see that with the runners in Jamaica.
No
Nobody
question.
has outfits that are more representative of their country.
No question.
I want to ask you, Dr. Amen, what I've asked everybody now, and that seems to be like that's going to be like my go-to question. When did you bump into Marcus Garvey?
Oh, this is a great question. And I'm really honored to be here today. Professor Hunter, it's always great to and the community that you've created really continues that spirit of Marcus Garvey. And I got to say, I never knew a time without Marcus Garvey.
Wow.
My grandfather was a Garveyite in Jamaica before I was ever born. So my grandfather was born in 1913. And he had incidentally he lived through the pandemic at that time, and he remembered people wearing. He was a little boy then, but he remembered people wearing. He told me that story long ago, and I was like, wow, So at the height of Corona, of course, we take it seriously, but then I thought, if he had seen all these things and survived it, we gonna be all right, like Kendrick Lamar said.
No
We're going to get to the other side. We're going to have some pain and anguish, but he lived to be a grandfather. So obviously this happened, right? So I'll say that I never knew a time, Dr. Carr, without Marcus Garvey in my existence. He was talked about all the time in our house. A lot of it, I had no idea what what my parents and grandparents were talking about. I was like, what? But
as children would not, but the name was there
all the time, and I would hear stories. And my grandfather talked about buying a ticket on the Black Star Line. He talked about because his mother was also pro Garvey. She was Cuban and had come to Jamaica, and was my first teacher of healing of traditional medicine, and I spent a lot of time with her in Jamaica, just in the woods, like Professor Hunter was saying, and foraging and in the woods and pulling stuff and learning herbs. And one of the things I think she saw in Cuba was the idea that Blackness needed to be pushed forward. She was a very dark woman, and the idea that unions, this whole pro-union, pro-organization, that we need to get into that. So I think my grandfather was already programmed for that. And so when Garvey came along, even when he was a boy, it sparked something. And my great grandmother never said no. Like, oh, that's the rowdy Negroes and you can't. And there was a lot of that. There was a lot of that in Jamaica, much the same as the thing that Garvey spurned later, right? Like the thing that grew out of Garveyism, which is Rastafarianism. There's a lot of, that's not polite Jamaican behavior until it became commercial. Until Bob Marley, until he put it on. Yeah.
As Dr. James Turner used to talk about it, he said, I came from not the working class, the laboring classes. In other words, right. So I mean, your folk. I mean, it's one thing to be working class. You got a job, you get a pay stub, you pay your tax. The laboring class is just out here laboring, and you're right. That's that resonant. That's what upset the upper class about Garveyism. These them Negroes who work for us, do this, but we don't let y'all plan no policy. Go ahead. No. So your people were laboring class people, and you are too. It doesn't matter.
Right? Don't get uppity.
Don't get uppity. No question.
Don't get uppity. That's going to cause a shift in this paradigm of upper class, middle to upper and upper class, and then lower class, right, in this caste system in Jamaica, that there's really no middle class at that time, right? There's no middle, there's only proximity to whiteness. So you got your, high yellow, light skinned folk, or your folks with lots of money. So you could be light skinned and not have money and enter that class, or you could be dark and have money, but you cannot be dark and have no money. So there's this class division that was, as you mentioned, in place and firmly in place. And so that buffering that the British handed off, as they had in colonial culture all over the world, then became this very clear thing that Garvey saw. It's a clear thing that my grandfather, as a carpenter, and his brother's a carpenter, his father's a carpenter. My great grandmother was seamstress, and in addition to being an herbalist, right? So these are working class people.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to note that my grandmother's family, darker skinned people, but landholders on the other side. So there's this class disparity, right? You have these people from Mandeville who are landholders, and and then you have these folks in Kingston and in the St. Andrew that are not. So there, sometimes what we're thinking of just colorism actually crosses those lines into those societies, as long as your resources are there.
I'm assuming
Right.
there's also an urban rural kind of ethic at work there. I mean, most of the Garvey chapters in the US, for example, were in southern and rural communities. Was there something at play there in terms of even that interaction in your family between those living in the city and those in the country? And
Definitely, because what started to happen was these crowded in-city area, like in Kingston. So you start to see that happening, where people are going to city. They're country folk, but they're going to city to work and for better opportunities, much like people in the United States immigrated to, places further north, right? For a different life and the potential for that, for entering a different level of society, or giving their children more, whatever that is, right? So in my house, long story short, Garvey was a hot topic of conversation. There were things said. I wrote some of these things, like that Garvey we used to hear about Bagawaya.
Bagawaya.
You know Bagawaya?
No, Bagawaya. Tell us Bagawaya. I'm sure there are many who do, but I'm not one of them. What's Bagawaya?
We used to hear about Garvey was betrayed by Bagawaya. Apparently that was the person.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So that was we used to hear about that goddamn Bagawaya, like he was cursed in our house. There was just this conversation about how, and there was a conversation about how Marcus Garvey was sold for rice and peas, like how the desire for entering that class or money or separating oneself, that he was sold out by his own people. Like that was part of the conversation that we would have, that I heard, right, as a young person. It may not have been said to me, but I was in the room, right? Probably
ear hustling.
Yeah, I was in the room. I was just, and also something that I used to hear a lot is that Amy Ashwood never got enough credit.
Oh, no question about it.
I used to hear that all the time, that, oh, she's the one who ran the thing and he left the thing. And, so even though they loved Garvey, they felt as though she was never, both Amy's were just never really pushed forward a bit more. So
no, that's true. In fact, there's a scholar now working on a book on Amy Ashwood Garvey that is being advertised as correcting the record. Of course, we can set that aside completely. Tony Martin wrote a book called Amy Ashwood Garvey, Wife Number One. But Amy Ashwood, as we know, wrote her own memoir, Lionel Yard. She did and the fights. John Herbert Clark used to say this all the time. He said, he knew both Amy Ashwood and Amy Jakes, and he said, the things that Amy Ashwood would say, he said, I couldn't even write them down, because if I had tried to write them on paper, they would have burst into flame. He said, I mean, Amy Ashwood was right there with him. And you're right. And of course, that dynamic, you heard, obviously, Professor Hunter, Karen mentioned Hubert Henry Harrison earlier, you know, there was a trial about Harrison. There was rumors of a relationship between them. Set aside that stuff. As a political thinker, though, as an orator, in many ways, and I wonder, did any of your relatives or any of the elders talk about her capacity for speech? Because Amy Ashwood Garvey apparently was a hell of an orator, perhaps even better than Marcus Garvey. I think she beat him as kids one time. And of course, final other thing I would say is that when they had the 5th Pan-African Congress in Manchester, in England, Amy Ashwood Garvey is invited to preside over one of the opening sessions. There's a picture of her there at the 5th Pan-African Congress. Amy Ashwood Garvey is a fascinating figure. So they talked about her. You heard them talking about her too.
I heard about Amy, but the man married 2 Amy's. Like this whole thing, like, you know, when you marry somebody with the same name, and then
Yes.
I think Fred Douglass had the same thing, right? Like,
yeah, after Anna passed, people say he married a white woman. He said that's late in the game. Him and Anna rolled till she made transition. So people they beat up Fred, but I'm like, Fred was married to a black. In fact, she the one got him out of slavery.
Right.
So yeah, that's crazy.
Yeah. So the other thing that was interesting to me, like when you speak about her as an orator,
yes.
I hadn't heard that in our house, just that she ran the business when he wasn't there, and that if it weren't for her, it would have been worse even on him. And the other thing that I thought was interesting that I used to hear is that he learned how to orate in the United States. He wasn't good at that until he watched other preachers, right, do this. Yeah. Let me see. I made a note that he got to Harlem, right? And he was I used to hear that he was so nervous that he fell off the stage. Have you heard that?
Yes. Yeah. In fact, the first time he spoke, Hubert Harrison, of course, gave him his first opportunity, because by then Hubert Harrison had the Liberty League. He had done, and Harrison from I want to say he's from the Virgin Islands. I forget which island, maybe St. Croix.
I think so.
Yeah. So but you know, you know this, of course, as a daughter of the Caribbean and as a New Yorker, regardless of which island you from, you get to the city, they're gonna look out for you based on coming from the Caribbean. So yeah, but Garvey, you're right. Garvey watched, and Harrison apparently was a spellbinding orator, and he wasn't alone. Those street speakers. I guess, you know, you came in. I guess you saw some of those orators in Harlem. I mean, I guess the descendants of that tradition. You get your stepladder, you do what you do.
Yeah, it builds, right? And so it builds to Malcolm, it builds to, right? So we have these influences as we go forward. You know what it was? I wrote it down. I used to hear about Sunday. You go and watch the man Sunday. And I thought it was the day of the week, right? Like it was a preacher on a Sunday. But come to find out, right, that this was Billy Sunday.
Oh, Billy Sunday.
But as a child, you know, I just heard, oh, you go to watch the man Sunday. You're going on Sunday. You go on Sunday. And I was like, Sundays? Okay, well, that's the day people go to church.
Oh, that's interesting.
It was Billy Sunday. And what I found out was that he had a very athletic style that attracted crowds. So he was stalking the stage, you know, Chris Rock style, right? Like he's all the way on one side. He's
a lot more bass in his voice and maybe compelling, because Chris Rock can hear.
Right.
Billy Sunday
style.
He was a radio preacher though, huh?
He was an evangelist. And so he went to church just for, you know, for solace. Like he just wanted to feel better, I think, just because he was not
Marcus Garvey.
And then he watched Sunday and he's like, okay, wait a minute, I can get some things. So I'm sure he put some of that into those theatrics into, you know, what he was doing.
And used them for a different purpose though, because Billy Sunday, if memory serves me correctly, was not only was he a famous preacher on the radio, he was, and I'll tell you, I never heard of Billy Sunday until as an undergraduate, we put a production together at Tennessee State of Pearly Victorious, you know, the musical, the one Alvin Davis wrote, right? And I played Pearly, and I had to memorize the song. I won't sing it here, but it was like, the Lord lives up in heaven, the devil lives in hell, you and I, we do the best we can. Move over Billy Sunday, move over Billy Graham, make way for a new preacher man. But the whole Billy Sunday was in the tradition of Billy Graham.
Right.
So
Okay, that makes sense.
Garvey
I didn't
takes
know
the
that.
oratory of Billy
Yeah.
Sunday in terms of the style, but what he doesn't
Right.
take is the it's almost like fascist adjacent, because Billy Sunday, them guys came along during the period when you got the anti-Catholic stuff, Charles Lindbergh, that stuff
Right.
Philip Roth writes about, and they made that HBO series, The Plot Against America. These are the people who are against the Jews. They're against the cat. It's like a MAGA. Billy Sunday was like a MAGA type. You know what I'm saying? So Garvey is listening to the oratory, and he takes that style, but he doesn't take his ideology. That is fascinating. And you heard Billy Sunday as a child.
I did. The man studied from Sunday. And I was like, okay, he's studying on a Sunday. Like, I didn't get it at all. And then come to find out that was the deal. And I was like, oh, that makes sense. And so it just goes to show that a lot of times we are influenced, and we'll take something from here and something from there. And it doesn't have to be the ideology, but it's the style, that athletic style of walking on the stage, because I'm sure that humiliating moment of speaking on stage for Garvey and being so nervous that he falls off of the stage. It's like, so between Amy and Billy Sunday and, it's like, oh, okay. I understand the charisma that's necessary to get this job done. So I used to hear that. And I also, what was the other one that he spent time in St. Louis?
Yeah.
I used to hear that a lot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was interesting, just, as an interesting thing to think about, like what goes on in St. Louis. Like St. Louis has not budged. He went to protest there in St. Louis and still, right? Like St. Louis, and not that the rest of the country is not a problem and the rest of the colonized world, but I thought it was interesting that was a place he went, and then he started to change from Jamaica. I need to think to like, this is a problem everywhere. And Black America needs to be like where I am with it. And so those are the things that I heard. And that bag of wire, I don't know who he was.
Somebody put in the chat the Burning Spear talk, right? Sings about bag of wire. I'm trying to actually, because of course the first Burning Spear I think about is no one remembers old Marcus Garvey. That song, Marcus Garvey, you know what I'm saying? But no, and Marcus Garvey would come to pass.
Right. Garvey's Ghost.
Garvey's Ghost. In fact, you don't want to ask you too about this, because clearly your grandparents and that generation had direct memories of Garvey.
Yeah.
But you grew up.
He remembers that. He remembers when Garvey was sent back to Jamaica after he was deported back after his jail term.
That's right.
He told me that they kicked him out of America and they send him on back to Jamaica, and the people don't even celebrate him. Like he felt that the Jamaicans did not celebrate him in a way that they really should have. And there was that feeling in general. So those are kind of like those pivotal points in my memory for Garvey, the conversation in our house.
Well, that's interesting, because we talked about this little Karen on her radio show Wednesday rather. The Jamaican government, of course, the British really propping him up, tried to tell the U.S. not to deport Garvey. They did not want him deported back to Jamaica. But the masses of people, in fact, when Garvey showed up in Kingston, got off the boat, he was supposed to go to Liberty Hall and give a speech. But there were so many people already in the hall, thousands around, that he got up on the running board of the car, gave like a 3-minute speech, and said tomorrow, and they had to move to the stadium on the next day. And it was still, like you said, that laboring class. But let me ask you, obviously you weren't there for any of that, but man, what a gift to be able to hear that mouth to ear from people who were. You came of age in a polynational city like New York. Garvey, what was Garvey's presence then? Was it in the music? Was it in the conversation? I mean, every time you talk about growing up, I think about that, and what a wonderful moment that must have been to be surrounded by this Pan-African vibe and to be at the center of it as a child. So was Garvey floated around in New York in the day?
Yeah, you mean in my time?
Yeah, I'm talking about your time now. Yeah. Yeah. Because
But
in Tennessee, we didn't hear Garvey.
right.
I heard Garvey in college, but I assume you grew up with him too. You grew up with him too.
Well, you know what it is? I think we have to take it in those steps, right? So yes, Garvey, I heard about Garvey. We were talking about Garvey. Here's the steps in my mind, right? Please let me know, but in my mind, there's Garvey, and then we have those children of Garvey, right? So then we have the other Pan-Africans. We move forward. I'm just gonna make big notes, right? And then we have Malcolm, right? Majorly influenced by Garvey, and and possibly because he had parents who were Caribbean, right?
Yes.
And then we move forward, who were Garveyites.
That's right.
Okay, so then we move forward, and we have Rastafari because of not just what I heard in my house, right, in this conversation, because my grandparents were not listening to Burning Spear, and they were not listening to those songs because that was not their generational path. Like my parents were listening to that, right? So my grandparents were still listening to Mento, which is the music that comes before ska, and they were listening to the origins, like the ska, and then like how Toots and the Maytals and like those styles of music that gave birth to reggae. So they weren't in that set, it's not like they were against it. It's just that then I heard that music, and it was like my parents and partly my music.
Yes.
And so what I observed was that reggae artists, as that started to come forward, came to New York, or the music was traveling both to Britain and to New York primarily, right? And parts of Canada, but like these are epicenters. And then that influences hip hop, right? And so that toasting style on the microphone, like the dub plates, the instrumental versions of a song, what they call dub plates, are played, and then people are toasting on the song, and they're giving you things. And sometimes you'd hear that, like, is it Marcus Garvey, so and so, we have culture, right? So in between singing about ladies jiggly bits and having some kind of gun culture, because you have to understand these are like working class people, so this is what they're seeing. Just like hip hop has always talked about what it sees, these are the nascent roots of hip hop. And then we come forward, right? And of course there are American, like this is an American Caribbean mashup that you get in hip hop, but it's tremendously influenced by the Caribbean and Jamaica in particular. And that's why you'll see so many hip hop artists are of Caribbean descent, right? And what we then see is that those styles of consciousness start coming forward. And so if you're listening to the beginning, not the total beginnings of hip hop, but that almost middle school in the 80s, then you're hearing about consciousness and the conversations that we're having, with the X medallions on and the kufis, people got on the kufi and the X medallion
and the red, black, and green. That's when we started coming of age. Yeah, absolutely.
Everywhere. If you didn't have some red, black, and green clothing, something was wrong with you.
X-Clan said this is protected by the red, black, and green.
The red, the black, and the green.
Green.
Right. And so we would hear that. So everywhere you're hearing red, black, and green, there's Garvey, right? Everywhere you're seeing it, everywhere you're seeing a kufi, you're seeing so of course Malcolm X, right? And then Spike Lee does that movie, and it pushes it forward in terms of more Malcolm. But if you were really in conversation, you were talking about the influences, right? So Garvey was there, and it's interesting to me how he's played the influencer, but the backbone.
Oh, yes.
He played the backbone in that.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, no.
So hip hop has it. Hip hop really owes a lot to Garvey. It owes a lot to, those people who came out of that school and started talking about those things right alongside the other toasting that they were doing. So it's amazing to me, from Yellow Man to, Wild Apache, who was, like all the, right. We have Ninja Man. We have all these people doing this toasting. And so, yeah, they're singing about, Punani this and so that. But then inside of that song or the next song, they're talking about culture, roots and culture. And then we get that rootsy music. And you can't mention it without mentioning Bob. You can't say anything without mentioning Burning Spear and, all of these groups. The Mighty Diamonds has Marcus Garvey in their song. So it just starts to move forward.
What is the, I'm sorry. What is the, you mentioned something near the very beginning when we first started talking about commercialism in the market. I was looking at, school started last week and Howard has signed this 20-year deal with Jumpman and Nike. And I'm looking at these kids walking around with this Michael Jordan silhouette Jumpman on one side, and on the other side it says Howard University. And I'm just shaking my head. I understand money, but when they did, the NBA did a basketball game, HBCU All-Star, and they had red, black, and green in the logo. I mean, what is the impact of the market on activity that was in fact anti-capitalist? Because as you say, as you're talking about these artists, I'm thinking even about somebody like Mighty Sparrow in Trinidad, when he's going after Eric Williams.
Yeah.
He said they raise up on the taxi fare. No, doctor, no. And the cost of the milk is so dear. No, doctor, no. I mean, so much of that music and that culture is critiquing class, is critiquing power. And Garvey is their champion. Like I say, the roster. But here we are today, and red, black, and green is a marketing thing. I mean, people are using red, black, and green, and it ain't got nothing to do with empowerment and liberation. I don't know if you have any thoughts about it, because you mentioned the market earlier. So I wondered what you think.
It's very interesting. I think about the marketing that Garvey even had before we get to that, right? And the idea of uniforms, right?
Yes.
That military uniforms were empowering to people of color. That's why I wore this jacket today. I was like, let me put some.
I know that's right. you got the stripe.
Little epaulets. He always had his epaulets on and whatever. Yeah. And sometimes was criticized by people saying, well, you're wearing the white man uniform. Why do you have to wear that? And, but the thing is, he understood the power of dressing like you're in power, especially if people have been under colonial rule, number one. And number two, it sets up this concept of a nation. Like, I am a leader who is worthy of being followed. I am a leader who you're going to have to contend with colonial forces, because I own uniforms. What? You don't have a monopoly on uniforms.
That's right.
And so the idea of red, black, and green coming through, and you hear it, like I said, you hear it in Jamaican music all the time, and even in the logos of Jamaican artists. And then you'll see it forward into hip hop. I mean, look at Tribe Called Quest. Like, every album they had, every symbol was red, black, and green. When you see that on their albums, you're like, oh, okay, I get it now,
Exactly.
And so that marketing is there. When we talk about the push forward and the appeal of red, black, and green and these colors, I mean, sometimes I wonder, Dr. Carr, if like our appeal, I'm big on the DNA, right, of where we are and like how we live with certain plants we're attracted to, certain things in the natural world, certain things that remind us of our heritage. And I often wonder, like Gucci and some of these other brands that use red, black, green, and gold, or red, black, green, like if it's not something that's in us that wants to really be connected with that, but we're moving into this space of fashion, like these colors being used in that capacity. I mean, good example, our dear brother Virgil Abloh, who passed on, made some clothing a couple of years ago for the Off-White brand, and he had like a Jamaican jumper, right, like a sweater and some other things, and they had red, gold, green as the colors, and it said Jamaican flag jumper, and that's not the Jamaican flag. And so
you're gonna remix it. It's not gonna be political.
Well, they had to pull it. They pulled it, and the sweater that costs like $600.
Oh, I didn't know that they pulled it.
they pulled it, and any of the other things that fell inside of that scope of the design was, first of all, it's not the Jamaican flag, and people came after them. And then, lots of folks in the Rastafarian community were like, what is this? Like, why are you using this and saying it's Jamaican flag? Like, that's not accurate.
Do you think if it had been accurate that they would have pulled it anyway? What would the response been had it been accurate?
That's a good question. Jamaicans are just up for trouble generally.
Okay. No, because I wonder, because
this is why we're Maroons at heart, the working class people. And so we're always up for a fight. I like a little fight. It gets my blood going. Okay. So when somebody gives me trouble, I'm like, okay, let's do it today.
No reason I say, because, they had to pull that Juneteenth ice cream, but they'll be back. Because they're going to be, with the diversity, equity, and inclusion stuff, they'll hire a couple of Black people who will tell them, no, do it this way. And then, when they hit the right combination, we'll probably go in and buy this Juneteenth ice cream.
Yeah.
So, that's why I wondered whether or not.
I wanted actually to convene this meeting today. I wanted us to have kind of a small strategy session, short one, just to kind of start to this point. What is our responsibility to reject when they do pay somebody or bring in, because, at the end of the day, like you said, Dr. Carr, they'll always come back. It's like, we can't get you this way. We can't get you that way. All right, let's bring these trumped up charges. Oh, that didn't work. All right, let's kill you. All right, that didn't work. Like they're always, they never sleep. But we seem to get tired. We get tired. I'm tired of voting. Tired of, just we get tired, and I get it. People that have worked endlessly for and built nations literally on our backs, it's exhausting. I don't think we have the luxury to be tired, because freedom is the goal.
No question.
Be tired until everyone's free, like everyone.
And then have to fight again, because freedom isn't a permanent condition.
No.
So can we talk about what that looks like? I mean, Garvey, man, in a short period of time, and Dr. Carr, you laid it up, there was a crack. There was a fissure while they were fighting each other. He was able to get in there and drop something in here, right? He was able to drop this notion of self-sufficiency and of excellence and of coming from greatness that inspired nations of people all over the globe.
Yeah. With achievements. It wasn't just rhetoric. That rhetoric then led to achievements.
Yeah.
Right. So where are we now? And what do we need to do to take, because I feel like we've all talked about this many times, and Garvey's Ghost, by the way, is an amazing tea. I'm not doing an ad. I'm just saying. I talked about our TV. Garvey's Ghost, a couple people in the chat.
Garvey's Ghost is the yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we just say that.
Shout out to the great North Carolinian and New Yorker Max Roach, of course, because when I drink my Garvey's Ghost from Calabash, and Sunyatta has conjured this Garvey's Ghost tea, I drink it and I usually put on that Max Roach, because that just keeps me going. I mean, in fact, what's that Garvey's Ghost, Sunyatta?
Magic.
I'm sure the magic bonds it, but then
witches have magic. That's that thing. And that's how we decolonize our thought process on it. That when we come out of maroon culture, when we come out of the, I always assert, and I'll fight anybody because I'm Jamaican. I'll fight a baby.
You be talking about fighting all the time. Yeah, it's about the 10th time she talked about fighting.
Why you want to fight a baby though?
Yeah, that's her saying, right?
I'll fight anybody. If babies are like this, you just push them over; they'll fall. It's not even a big deal. So so here's the thing: that fighting spirit, right? That maroon energy. I assert that that's really why Jamaica has become a brand. So when we talk about Virgil Abloh, when we talk about red, black, and green, when we talk about the use of these colors, and even Jamaicans in the Olympics and other things, I just think the idea of Jamaican food and Jamaican culture and Jamaican music. I mean, you can't have punk music without Jamaican music. You can't have hip hop without it. You can't have, so. This is a global brand. I've been in places in the world, Brazil, wherever. Like I've gone to Brazil, and people like, oh, and they're speaking to me in Portuguese, which my Portuguese is okay, you know what I mean? But they're going a mile a minute. I'm like, slow down, and then I got you. And they will say, oh, I thought you were Brazilian. And I'll say, no, I'm from Jamaica. And they'll say, Jamaica, Bob Marley. And then they'll start singing in a way that is amazingly phonetic, like, oh, don't worry about that thing. Like, it's just, it's off key, it's wonderful, it's everything. I love us because they just took the song, even though they don't understand the words, and it just feels right to them in their soul. And then they're like, Jamaica, Jamaica. They're looking around their store, take this Jamaica, take that Jamaica. They're giving me things. Wow. And that just spoke to me that this is a global brand. Garvey pushed this brand. This is a maroon spirit, you know, being from St. Anne, Jamaica. Garvey is right in that country. You know, he's right in that Runaway Bay area, which is my favorite, to be honest. And my parents are not even from that area. And, you know, Runaway Bay and these natural hot springs and this herbal medicine tradition, and the idea that our heroes, you know, from Cudjoe to Queen Nanny or whatever, that these people fought using those natural resources. And to them, going into the hills and being of direct Ghanaian descent, most of them, you know, creating Ashanti village and creating Akampong City, renaming those places that are maroon colonies for our home in Ghana, right? That this says everything you need to know about Garvey, that rematriation that he's talking about, the repatriation is a direct line, right? And then the branding that the colors produce, like Jamaica decided its flag should have no red, no blue, no white.
How about that?
On purpose. They did not want to use colonial colors. And they said, we just got the color wheel, got stuff on it. Let's see what we got. And did the same thing in that branding of red, black, and green, but using the gold as the sun and the green as the land and the black, and deliberately. And that was part of the problem with calling a jumper or a bag or a tote and all these other things that they did, the Jamaican flag collection, because we deliberately did not use those colors. And so it's disrespectful, you know, it's disregardful.
But they got the bag for it.
So
they got the money bag, right? 3
things that we can do right now to, you know, to not honor, because it's not even about honor. Like, I feel like we keep talking about this disruption, right? We had a 400-year disruption in our ability. You know, you think about the great civilizations built, and then they got decimated or conquered or got tired. And then in comes enslavement, you know, for that period of time that just dispersed, and then we erased our memory. Part of what we're doing in Narrative in Nubia is to remember. We talk about that, bringing that memory back to who we are. And that requires education and us being fierce in our schools to make sure that the next generation of children learn about not just Harriet Tubman and Frederick Douglass, but all of the things that the continent, you know, if I got to learn about England, which I did, well, you know, that was part of my history, and the British, you know, why aren't we learning about what came before that in all of our schools? And if we can't push that in our schools, at least in our homes, that needs to be part of, you know, the message that we imbue our children with the knowledge of self, because that is important. What else should we be doing to build on the things? I mean, Garvey did that with very little money, very little education, but with a vision. Came here, man that didn't look the way people wanted people to look. You know, he was dark skinned with a broad nose, big lips, and all of the things that were supposed to be inferior and dirty, and galvanized 6 million people around a notion of self-empowerment.
It's amazing. If I may, one of the things that was impressed in my house that came back to me as you're speaking, Professor Hunter, because what you're asking is brilliant. You know, we can study, and when people say, oh, it was a long time ago, stop griping about having been slaves and stuff. You know, Marcus Garvey, my grandfather saw Marcus Garvey, right? And Marcus Garvey's father was born enslaved. So stop playing these little games.
Right.
Okay? Stop playing these games.
That's right.
You know, you sit a couple of 80-year-old people, 90-year-old people together. They got their, you know, if you add their ages together, you got slavery. It's like, cut it out, you know. And one of the things that was talked about in my house, Dr. Carr, was the self-determination. And this, I think, is one of those pivotal aspects that Garvey got. I mean, he had a newspaper as a teenager, right? Like in Jamaica, he learned printing and had a newspaper. His father, I remember hearing that his father made him sleep outside sometimes, not because he didn't love him, but he was trying to show him how do you survive certain things. And it wasn't all the time. It was like, let's see you escape from this thing. Let's see you dodge this thing. And let's see you. And he was constantly drilling him because of his own experience, right? In slavery, in being enslaved. And the thing that came out of that conversation in our house was start your own business. Start your own businesses, become self-sufficient. That spirit of self-sufficiency and self-determination, which then went into the Black Panthers, it went into the Nation of Islam, it went, you know, so all these organizations that learned from Garvey, that one of the things that he left us with was, and even with the Black Star Line, he's like, Black people need their own ships. They don't need to stay in steerage next to the animals and other things when you're traveling. He's like, we need our own stuff. And so starting a business, patronizing other Black businesses is essential, he said, right? And then one of the other things was, do not criticize each other publicly in mixed company, right? You keep that in family. You say, hey, there's an issue here. Let's try to resolve it. I want us all to be better. You know, when I hear people criticize Black-owned businesses and they're like, oh, they didn't, yeah, that's Black-owned for you. Yeah, they didn't send my, you don't say that about Target. You don't say that about other things. And our realization that we didn't have the resources and the multi-generational wealth to make this happen. We were the builders of that multi-generational wealth. So that criticizing of, oh, Black-owned bank, well, that's yeah, that my card wouldn't work. Take it easy.
Oh, he said, take it easy.
Easy. Be easy, man. Come now, easy. Ease up yourself.
Yeah.
Cease and settle. Cease. And so that idea that what we need to do is, if we have family issues, handle it like family. Don't post it on YouTube. Don't post it on Facebook. Don't do that. Handle it internally, because all of us, especially somebody who started a business or doing something, or the Black-owned bank or whatever we're doing, a professor at a university, you know, you can politely, we can find each other. Okay. If the FBI can find you and Facebook can find you and recommend, find the person, say, hey, you know, this happened. I really want to, for us to be in community. It's not like, oh, I supported them and they didn't do. What we say in our shop when somebody gets to our counter is when it's time for them to pay, our exchange of energy is, and then whatever that number is. I don't let people say, what's the damage? Or, oh, there's no damage.
Yes.
And it's an exchange of energy. You're not supporting me per se. I'm supporting you and you're supporting me. We are exchanging things. And Garvey has that tenet throughout his writing about Black-owned businesses. And that we must do that, whether it's a doctor, a lawyer, whatever, we must go to our own. I mean, Dr. Carr, how do you feel about that?
Oh, of course. I mean, there's no way to feel about it other than to agree 100%. And I mean, I wonder, and again, thinking about how you grounded in your practice and in the community around you and the communities you grew up in, that type of energy just multiplies. That positive, not just, I don't want to say positive as opposed to positive negative, but that generosity, that embracive, that inclusive spirit. and we think about ourselves as family. And
Yeah.
prior to the brutal structures that forced us together create a type of capacity. In some ways we never didn't think of ourselves as family, even with the internal, as you say,
Right.
challenge. But since the formal end of apartheid in the place like the United States, those cleavages now erupt in ways that we still claim family. And it seems to me that more often than in the past, the concept of family has kind of dissolved into almost a demographic label. It's being held together by a description rather than any experiential thing. I mean, and people and class then plays their role. We see in the United States, it seems to me that um the possibilities of doing something with that energy that will
Mm.
benefit all of us have increasingly been channeled into performance.
Right.
So when it's one thing, we should always be putting each other on. So this is not a criticism
Right.
at all, but the idea of owning and controlling. And people say, well, Garvey was a black capitalist. Well, don't channel that energy exclusively into capitalism. Ultimately, that system has to collapse. But this joint action, this collective action, will ultimately attack and dissolve that if we hold ourselves at the center of it. But then I see this energy being channeled into, well, I got this position at Nike or HBO, or I got this position at Riggs Bank or Chase Manhattan, so I'm gonna put on 2 or 3 more people. And then so now we're here, we represent, okay, that's a good sentiment, but that's not the ultimate objective. Your ultimate objective is to have your own institutions. And I wonder how you balance that, because that impulse gets channeled in the system we're in into representation, into diversity. Yeah, see, that's not, no. We want to be the ones in charge so we can build a different world, not be there was one of us here and now they're 15. And that's I don't know. I mean, but how do you grapple with that as somebody who, is an institution builder, who came out of a culture and a family and a community of institution builders? How do you balance that representation piece with the self-determination piece, which just seems to me is 2 different spheres?
Well, when you say representation, you mean making sure that we're seen, right? And
Making sure we're in spaces we don't control, with the objective of what exactly? Well, we're going to influence. So, like you mentioned, Virgil Abloh. Of
yeah,
course they called it Jamaica. Why? Because he don't own that. You just want your swag. You know what I'm saying? And we're gonna jack your swag now. I mean, when you make transition, we're gonna find another one, and we're gonna get that flag thing right. Ralph Lauren down there at Morehouse and Spelman. I'm looking at, what are y'all doing? Well, they see us. I feel seen. You should feel seen every time you look in the mirror or in the face of somebody else. What are you talking about? You feel seen. Oh, your master. You're talking about your master. Bob said you got to emancipate yourself from mental slavery, quoting Garvey. So I'm saying, yeah, that's what I mean in terms of that. This. Wow. Anyway, but
no, I'm with you. I'm with you. And when you talk about that representation, right? I bring it forward in my, like, something occurs to me. If you stay with me, I don't know. I could be, but I think about how Garvey influenced the Black Panthers, right?
yes.
And then I think about how you get the Black Panthers and other Pan-African organizations, pro-African organizations, pro-Black organizations. You get somebody like Tupac.
Yes.
Okay. And in that, I think Tupac, let's set aside his later work, mostly because I think he was psychically injured, as lots of our folks are when they enter a main stage in the, they enter the zeitgeist.
No question.
And is that he was a victim of being injured psychically, much like Biggie, put into these spaces where other people were making money off of them.
No question.
And There was violence going on, and just the encouragement of that.
No question. No question.
Was
And differently even than Biggie and the rest, because he was born into an attack on Black community. Here we are in Black
Right.
August, and of course we have to mention his so-called stepfather. I say his father, Mutulu
Right.
Shakur, still a political prisoner. His mother, Afeni Shakur, the Shakur. That boy was born. That young man was born into a violence against his community. So I mean, the fact that he did anything at all is a testament to the strength of our community. So I hear what you're saying. Right? He's coming. Yeah, that trauma is revisited on him later in his life. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Absolutely. And it's revisited, and it's visited upon him as he ascends, right?
Yes.
He's shot, people are taking advantage of his vulnerability. He's put into jail. Like there's this stuff that happens, and then he gets into the hands of someone like Suge Knight, right? And so let's set that later work. But when we look at his earlier work and mid work, we see that imprint, that thumbprint of Garvey, the thumbprint of growing up with freedom fighters, right?
Absolutely.
And when we look at that and we talk about the commercial representation, I think about the fact that Carl Kanai, like we have these Black brands that started to come out, right? Out of that whole, I'm wearing the X medallion, I'm doing, so we have these like Carl Kanai, you got Cross Colors, you got, so we have Willie.
I mean, yeah, we
have
came
Willie
up with
Smith.
that. Yeah.
Absolutely. We have Willie Smith, who's this first really dynamic Black designer who's in all these stores, Macy's and here and there. And we were so proud, that he's represented in these spaces. He was also, from what I understand, uncompromising within that, right? So, because his muse was his sister, who's, thick, beautiful Tukey Smith, and he was cutting clothes in a way that complemented the curves of women instead of asking them to be shaped like adolescent boys.
How about that?
This is a representation. We feel seen as Black people and Black women because he's primarily doing clothes for women, right? And we love that.
Well, we're seeing each other. It's not them doing that, right?
We're seeing each other.
Right.
And they couldn't tell him how to cut his clothes. And that was part of his thing, is like, you're not going to tell me how to do that. Now, the other thing that I find fascinating with regard to that period of time, you have somebody like Carl Kanai, who comes out with his brand. He's having trouble like getting it pushed forward. And he meets Tupac, right? And fashion and hip hop always went hand in hand. This is since the beginning, right? That hip hop has influenced dress codes, streetwear, and even to this day, what is mainstream now?
Oh, of course.
The sneaker culture.
They figured out how to make all the money off it. No question.
So when you talk about the Jumpman and all of that, this is just that sneaker culture that came forward, right? Of Nike Air, and and so when you have Carl Kanai, he comes out. He has a hard time selling his clothes. He meets Tupac, on the set of something, or, backstage, everybody was kind of all over the place, right?
Sure.
And he says to him, would you model for my clothes? Tupac's amazingly beautiful. This is a beautiful creature. Okay. I mean, I've seen Tupac in person, just.
Yeah, me too. I was struck by almost the same time I saw Prince. He was petite. He wasn't he wasn't smallish, but I mean, he just smiled like this little guy. I saw him when we in a Black Expo just after Juice came out. He came in, all the girls screaming. I'm like, wait a minute. And then he came as he approached. I'm like, just a little dude. I mean, but it's almost like a doll. It's like a little.
He's tiny. And and as an aside, we'll go back to Carl Kanai. There's a young person I met recently who said that they didn't know who Prince was. And so, I mean, he's a 17-year-old, and he's like, I don't know who this dude is. I kind of heard of him, but, and I showed them a video, and he said to me, that dude, like, looks like a woman. And I'm sure that like, he kind of doubted his masculinity. Like maybe Prince had never been with a woman or whatever. I said, let me tell you something.
Was he old enough to hear what you was about to tell him?
No, but I can't tell you what I said here, but
that's what I'm about to say.
It was real. And I just let him know that Prince was swimming in it. And like, there's, you don't understand what he was doing, but this was a very appealing person. So when you come to Tupac, you come to this very handsome person who is so beautiful that, as Jamaicans say, God must have touched you in your face and tell you you're beautiful. Like God just touched you and boom, right? And Carl and I asked him that, and he said, sure, I'll put your stuff on stage and I'll wear it, and he's like, would you mind taking some pictures with it? He's like, yeah, when? He's like, oh, I'll do a photo shoot next week.
That's
And
beautiful.
Carl asked him, how much would you charge me? Because I want to make sure that I can, afford your fee to come and model. And Tupac said, man, why would you even ask me that? Like, I'm your brother. Like, I'm not going to charge you to model your clothes. Like, I'm coming up, you coming up. And he asked him for nothing. And that's the spirit we talk about with Garvey coming forward, influencing these other Pan-African organizations. You got then the Panthers and et cetera, right? We got a lot going on at that time. And then Tupac is born into that. He's like, why would I charge you? When a lot of people at that time who are hip hop artists were charging other people to do this, he could not see the sense of that. And so when we talk about representation, why are we not representing Black-owned brands? I don't understand, especially, and I mean, at an HBCU, I'm trying to figure it out.
Oh, well, that's easy. That's just money.
Right.
Because it all comes back, as we know, to this kind of neoliberal model. And so what you're describing is very much, in terms of strategy, the impulse that we have to have. But the impulse will lead inexorably back to external control if we don't at some point say we have an ultimate objective, which is ownership. Because that just turns into, as we know with hip hop, that just turns into a label for a company. That just turns into a what do you call it, a fashion line within a larger house.
Right.
And you put on all your friends, no problem. And for every $10, you will make $1. Your friends will make 50 cents, and we'll get the other $9.50. In other words, or $8.50. So,
both docs, where's the system? Okay, so we know we need to know ourselves, but where's the system that would tell an HBCU that you're actually selling out your students, you're selling out your culture, you're selling out?
Oh no, they're not selling.
They're not selling out.
No, it's going to be internships. I'm sure there was a check involved in a 20-year deal.
Free us, the rest of us.
But HBCU ignores. I mean, that's just the thing. Which again, we have to distinguish demographic from this common kind of self-determination. I mean, HBCUs are Black HWCUs in the sense that the thing that makes them different are the people who are there. But structurally, you talk about systems, they replicate that system. I mean, and that's not, I mean, Garvey, for example, spoke at Howard University, and there was controversy. There was a challenge to that. Garvey, my dear friend and colleague, Claudrina Harrell, who has written on Garveyism, she did a dissertation. She's at the University of Virginia. She did a dissertation on Garveyism in the South. And what you see is, as you say, Sunyatta, I mean, he comes through St. Louis, and Walter Johnson has a great book on this called The Broken Heart of America, because St. Louis in many ways explains a lot of what we have suffered as a people in terms of its geographical location, the people who moved in. Gerald is from St. Louis. But when he travels through the South, the HBCUs provide some of the people who come to see him as he's traveling throughout the South. And at the same time, those HBCUs, the presidents, the administrations, the oppressive white boards, particularly for the public HBCUs, they are terrified of a potential insurgency from these students and in the surrounding communities, because these are, as your family was, and as my family was, and all of us pretty much, are working class or laboring class. So when you bring those kind of people into a university, this is how we get in the 60s and 70s, as we know. This resurgence in Garveyism, in part, is driven by these college students, particularly at HBCUs, who are coming into this Black Power movement, the Civil Rights movement, the Black Power movement. They're not only at the center of that movement, they are also influenced and influencing the HBCUs. And so now here we are in 2022. And we know those students. I mean, you've employed so many of them over the years, and I'm here teaching these students. We're there. At the same time, the structures are the same. So what
Right.
we're seeing now is it is entirely acceptable. In fact, in tiny doses, you can even integrate it into the corporate mindset
Mhm.
to have red, black, and green, to do a little ethnic, so-called ethnic attire, or maybe to have a kente tie, or maybe wear your hair with it that hasn't been processed in a certain way. You can do that now. Now, at the same time, the objective, however, is to get into that system.
Right.
In some ways, it's a betrayal, but it makes perfect sense. I mean, a partnership with a large corporation is a good thing.
Right.
And far from me to criticize it, I don't criticize it in part because we have to have spaces that we control that have different objectives, rather than trying to spend all our energy trying to change something that was set up to do what it's doing. They almost lost control in the 60s and 70s, but slowly they've clawed it back. And now the people telling people don't get too radical. I mean, Sigma Pi Phi right now is meeting, I think they're in the Bahamas. And, one of the things they do is say that for certain formal occasions and certain formal convenings, you can't wear African attire. You have to have on a suit and a tie.
Okay.
Yeah, my thing is good. That's why I'll never be a member of Sigma Pi Phi. Well, there'll be other members too, because I'm not going to tie a string around my neck again in life unless there's some particular reason. And I'm not mad at those who do. I'm just saying, you own this. You control this. You don't need anybody else around. Why? Because you're going to police yourself.
Right.
Because you still value something other than yourself. So that's not true. We have black designers. So why can't you have the option to have a black design that doesn't incorporate that aesthetic? Why? Oh, because in my heart of hearts, I don't think that I should occupy the highest rank. And as Malcolm asked the question, who taught you to hate yourself? That's what Garvey. Let me say one thing. I don't think Garveyism. And again, this isn't to make Marcus Garvey or Amy Jakes or Amy Ashwood Garvey into saints or heroes, because clearly we know they're human beings. But Garveyism is a challenge to the idea that we can't be at the center of our own reality. And even as it has its own internal contradictions, the Ethiopian Orthodox Church, they still have a lot of whiteness in there. They have declared that they're going to purge themselves of anything that doesn't allow them to be at the center. We can work out the details as we go on. But when you mention the uniforms, I think about, the Black Cross nurses,
right,
the African Legion. Okay, yeah, the uniforms may still look like these other people, but there are uniforms,
right,
and we created them, and we bought them from ourselves, and we're going to make more. And in the next generation, we might switch the uniform up completely. But what will remain is we get to choose. I mean, and you've seen a lot of this up close. You make decisions that always have us at the center, and they're constantly reminding us that we don't have to draw from outside sources for the choices we make.
No, but you know what, Dr. Carr, you're on point completely, and that thinking that we don't have to draw from outside sources completely. I mean, the cotton that the shirt is made out of, all the other stuff, we're going to have to use the devil's tools to move forward into saintness, right, into saintliness. But I will say this, that it's a sacrifice. Right. And I would,
no question.
Yeah.
Why did you take that side? You went like, it's the set. What was that? What was that, Dr. Amen? You shaking your head like, no, I can't really.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I would be remiss in my duties if I mentioned that Garvey said, own your own businesses, self-determination is the way to go. And that's what influenced all these other sets of people. And that's what influenced, even the people in my own family. Like, this is something we should do for ourselves. And truly, even though Garvey was villainized by certain classes of Jamaicans, right? And, I firmly believe that this is one of the reasons why Jamaicans who come to this country over the decades have opened businesses and really put a foothold into communities. I mean, you can't go to Brooklyn without, there's Jamaican restaurants, and there's Jamaican owned this, and there's so-and-so, and then the next set of Jamaicans, of the people of those children are going to medical school, they're going to here and that, they're going to, so there's a foothold and then a step. And I feel firmly that Garvey is responsible for that. Here's the thing, that if we're going to decide where and when where we enter into this society and our proximity to wealth, or creating resources, whatever those resources are, it's not just money. And I think sometimes we may not understand, right, that there are a bevy of resources. They're not just money. And we are so amazingly creative and inventive because we've had to be. And that's why these great things come out of us. That's why we could do something on a shoestring, open a business and be like, and make it look dynamic, and make it absolutely beautiful. Here's the thing. We may not necessarily be able to afford the real estate to buy a building, but we have to rent it. And so we have to get in bed with these other people who have gentrified a community or neighborhood. So there are sacrifices that you have to make for that greater good picture, as long as you're seeing that greater good. And the other sets of sacrifices there are things you will have to do without. You will have to honestly do without. And it's a leap of faith to say, I'm not going to get paid every 2 weeks. I'm going to have to step out on my own and move into that space. And when we talk about the side hustle in this culture, I just have a side hustle. I just need a side, it's going to remain on the side unless we move forward into it. And this is what Garvey was saying. You have to go ahead and step into that and call on your community and say, I'm doing this thing and I want to give you something. I want an exchange of energy where I'm exchanging with you positively. And I want us to do that with each other. And
maybe it's what Professor Hunter may ask about strategy. The first one you've been articulating in terms of vision, you got to have this, and then this one here, sacrifice.
That side hustle has to be the hustle. And it doesn't have to be the hustle. Let me use a different language.
No, but that's the point of entry, though. That's the language we're familiar with. So now, from that point, now what would you call it? Because young people say, "Oh, yeah, the hustle, I got it." Now, what would you call it?
That hustle culture is sometimes a struggle culture, and so
no question.
Moving from side hustle into vision, as you mentioned, and planning and determination, we're going to meet with the people we need. We're going to say, how can I learn from you? Or let me go to the bank and figure out what I'm going to need to get what I need, a loan or some capital. Let me go to my community and say, hey, will you all invest in something we can do together? And I want to spearhead this, and I really want, and part of the reason why Garvey failed, and people talk about the lack of his financial responsibility. Everywhere you read, you see that. The truth is he needed somebody who just handled that. He needed somebody who really stepped in.
Well, then plus there's external pressures. I mean, that's why I'll dismiss just about all of the white-facing, white bread, even if it's about Black people's scholarship on Garvey over the last generation, because to your observation earlier, it does two things it doesn't do. The first thing it does, it has a narrow definition of success and failure, and it's in dollars and cents. You can't, to the point you raised, when I think about you talking about your grandparents, particularly your grandfather, and talking about seeing Garvey, I think about, we talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Hugh Mozak's daughter, Una, who ran Liberation Bookstore.
Right.
And we talked about liberation and how her father would tell those stories. And we talk about, and Roy puts it in the documentary, about how when they would pull into the port in the Caribbean, the fruit would never make it back to New York. It would be spoiled because Garvey would tell them, stay there because people are bringing their children down. I suspect your granddad, maybe one of them, they're bringing the children to the dock because they've never seen a ship controlled by Black people loading stuff. And it's more important for them to see that than it is for us to sell these bananas when they get off the dock. And man, people say, well, he failed. Did he fail? I'm looking at Sunyatta Amen, and I'm saying not only did he not fail, he succeeded in ways y'all can't stop, because you can't put a number on inspiration. That's the first thing. And then the second thing is what you said. I was looking at a video of this young couple who have moved to West Africa. Mm-hmm. And young people, they have what we know, young, But at the same time, what they said is, we're never coming back to the United States. And I'm laughing. I'm like, why are they saying that? And as they talked, it was clear. They said, if we had waited to come, and they had their 2 children, one was an infant. The brother had the infant strapped to him. He said, they both said, if we had waited, we wouldn't have done it. He said, sometimes you have to take a leap. And when you're in that leap, you will find the thing that has been speaking to you all along. And unlike this system, I was looking today's Financial Times, this guy, Adam Newman, it says, Adam Newman, whose revolution in office working turned up a cautionary tale of startup hubris. He was the one who started WeWork. This week won backing for his next big idea. Less than 3 years after WeWork's valuation crashed along with its listing plan, Flow pledges a seismic shift in residential property. The interjection from Netscape founder Mark Anderson put a value of $1 billion on the project, which aims to address housing shortages, urban talent drain, and human longing. My point is, this dude who failed with WeWork just got a valuation of $1 billion and like $350 million from this venture capitalist who said, oh, I like your vision of basically buying up all the real estate and trying. Now, my point is, ain't nobody come to Dr. Sunyatta Amen and said, you know what? Here goes $350 million. If you had 350, it reminds me when Jesse ran for president and we went to see him. We were in undergrad and Jesse was speaking in Nashville and he said, if the other candidates had my budget, they could not compete. And then he said, if I had the other candidates' budget, they could not compete. He said the same way, and everybody just started cheering because we understood. If you had this guy's resources, and this man done messed up where we work, gets another $1 billion valuation. If you had his valuation, we would be free because you would have all of us. And if they had yours, we would be free. So, but all we have, not all we have, obviously, but the main thing we have is to the observation you made, and which has made you not only successful, even by these metrics that are so narrow, but successful in that larger Garvey sense. And as we are building Nubian narrative, making us successful, what we have is each other.